The timing is the thing nobody examines honestly. Not what the falling feels like or what psychological mechanism produces it or what it means about the depth of the connection. The timing. The specific, observable, consistently reproduced fact that the falling tends to occur after the rejection rather than before it or instead of it. And what that timing actually reveals about the nature of avoidant attachment when it encounters someone with genuine depth. Because if the falling were simply about the empath's qualities, her perception, her warmth, the specific quality of engagement she brings, it would make more sense for the falling to occur during the connection, while she was present, while the qualities were being actively demonstrated. The empath was bringing everything she brings throughout the dynamic. The perception was present from the beginning. The warmth was consistent. The genuine engagement with the avoidant's actual interior was ongoing throughout. And yet the falling follows the leaving rather than preceding it, arrives after rather than during, declares itself in the absence of the very thing that supposedly produced it. The timing is the clue, and the clue points somewhere more honest than most examinations of this dynamic are willing to go. The avoidant did not fall in love with the empath's qualities, not primarily. Not at the level where the falling actually occurs. The avoidant fell in love with the experience of those qualities landing in their interior, and the experience of something landing in the interior is only fully available after the thing has been removed. While it is present, the interior is occupied with managing the threat that the presence generates. The threat response is running, the distance maintenance mechanisms are deployed. The specific, sophisticated architecture of avoidant self-protection is actively engaged with the work of not allowing this to land too fully. The qualities are being perceived, they are not being received, not in the complete, undefended, full interior contact sense of genuine reception. They are being perceived from behind the management, experienced through the filter of the threat response, present but not fully allowed. When the empath leaves, genuinely, non-strategically, in the actual departure way that her genuine detachment produces, the management system has nothing left to manage against. The presence that was generating the threat response is gone, and in the absence of the threat, something unexpected happens. The interior encounters what the presence was actually doing while it was being managed against. This is the specific psychological mechanism that the timing reveals. The falling is not a new development. It is the belated recognition of what was already occurring throughout the dynamic, but was being prevented from reaching the level of conscious acknowledgement by the management system's ongoing activity. While the empath was present, the management system was occupied, running its threat assessment, maintaining its calibrated distance, deploying the specific tools of avoidant self-protection that convert genuine intimacy into something manageable. All of that activity required bandwidth, and the bandwidth requirement meant that the interior's actual response to the empath's presence, the genuine, undefended, this is what I actually feel response, was not available at the surface, was running deeper, in the layers that the management system does not reach, without access to conscious acknowledgement. The departure removes the management system's occupation. There is no longer a presence to manage against. The threat response quiets for lack of an active threat, and in the quieting, the interior finally has access to what it was registering throughout, the full, unmediated, now unmanaged experience of what the empath's presence was doing in the places the management system could not reach. That experience, finally available to conscious acknowledgement without the management system intercepting it, is what gets called falling in love. Not a new feeling. The delayed arrival of a feeling that was present throughout, but was successfully kept from the surface by the very mechanisms that the falling reveals were insufficient after all. The insufficiency of the management mechanisms is the other thing the timing reveals, and it is worth examining honestly because it is more complicated than the simple observation that the avoidant finally felt something. The management mechanisms were not overcome during the connection. They worked. They did what they were designed to do. They maintained the distance, prevented the full landing, kept the threat response running efficiently enough that the interior's genuine response never fully reached the surface in a form that would have required acknowledgement or changed behavior. The management mechanisms were overcome by the absence, by the specific, sustained, genuine absence that the empath's real departure produced. The absence removed the conditions that the management mechanisms were designed to operate within. They were built for presence, for the ongoing work of maintaining calibrated distance from an ongoing intimacy. They were not built for the specific different work of managing the interior's encounter with what the presence was doing once the presence is gone and the management system is no longer needed. This is a subtle but important distinction. The avoidance defenses were not penetrated, they were rendered irrelevant, not by a person doing something to them, but by the absence of the person they were organized to protect against. For the empath, this distinction has practical implications that are worth sitting with honestly. The falling that follows the rejection is not evidence that the right approach during the connection would eventually have overcome the defenses. The defenses were not overcome. They were made irrelevant by the departure. A different approach during the connection, more patience, more understanding, better communication, more effective demonstration of the empath's value, would not have produced the falling, would have kept the management system occupied with a different version of the same threat response. The falling is specific to the departure. It requires the departure to occur, which means it cannot be produced while staying, can only be produced by genuinely going. This is not a recommendation to leave in order to produce the falling. That framing converts the departure into a strategy aimed at producing an outcome, which makes it not genuinely a departure, and therefore not capable of producing what genuine departure produces. It is simply an accurate description of why the timing is what it is. The falling follows the rejection, because the rejection is what creates the conditions in which the falling becomes accessible to the avoidance conscious experience. Not as a reward for leaving, as the natural consequence of the management system encountering the only condition it was not built to handle. The new angle this version offers, which the previous examinations did not fully develop, is this. The avoidant who falls in love with the empath they rejected is not experiencing a change of heart. They are experiencing the delayed arrival of a heart that was already there. The heart was always there. The response to the empath was always genuine. The interior registration of what she was and what she brought was accurate and real from early in the connection. What changed is not the feeling. What changed is the management system's ability to prevent the feeling from reaching the surface. And it lost that ability not because it was overcome or dismantled or worked around, because the conditions it requires to function, the presence of the person it was protecting against, were removed. The falling is the feeling finally arriving at the surface in the absence of the management system's opposition. Not love appearing for the first time. Love becoming visible for the first time. Because the infrastructure that was keeping it invisible has nothing left to do. What the empath makes of this is, as always, her own determination. Armed with the accurate understanding of what the falling is and what produced it, and what it does and does not imply about the avoidance readiness or capacity for genuine relational change. The falling is real. It is the interior's honest registration of what was actually there throughout, finally surface accessible. It is not manufactured or inflated by loss. It is simply the delayed arrival of something that was always present but always managed. What it is not. Evidence that the management system has been dismantled. Evidence that the patterns that produce the rejection have been examined and interrupted. Evidence that the avoidant has done or is doing the specific, interior-directed, sustained work that genuine change requires. The falling is the raw material of possible change, not the change itself. The raw material requires the avoidant's own willingness and their own work to become anything more than what it currently is. A genuine feeling that is finally visible, located in an interior whose behavioral expression of it has not yet demonstrated the capacity to honor what the feeling actually requires. The empath fell first. In a different sense, she fell in love with the real version of the avoidant. The interior she perceived accurately throughout the dynamic, the defended layer that her perception reached past the management to find. She fell in love with what was genuinely there before the avoidance interior had access to the acknowledgement of what was genuinely there. She saw it first, fell first, stayed with the perception long past the point where the behavioral expression of it warranted the staying. The avoidant falls later, after the management system has been rendered irrelevant by her genuine departure, After the interior finally has surface access to what it was registering throughout, she fell for the real person while the real person was hidden. He fell for the real her after the real her was gone. The symmetry is almost architectural. Two people falling for the genuine interior of the other at precisely the point when the other's genuine interior is least available to them. Her falling was too early for the conditions that would have allowed it to be received. His falling is too late for the conditions that would make it relevant to what she is currently building. Whether the timing ever aligns, whether his interior's delayed acknowledgement of what she was arrives at a point when she is genuinely available and genuinely willing, and the evidence of his changed capacity genuinely supports the re-engagement, that is the question the future holds, not the past. Not the falling itself, the future, his, determined by what he does with the delayed acknowledgement, hers, determined by what she requires when and if the acknowledgement arrives in a form worth engaging with, both genuinely open, both genuinely separate, both belonging entirely to their respective people, which is, finally, exactly as it should be. The empath fell first. That is where the previous section ended, and it is the most honest and generative observation in the entire examination of this title. She fell for the real version while the real version was hidden. He fell for the real her after the real her was gone. The symmetry is architectural and worth developing further because it contains something genuinely true about how avoidant attachment interacts with empathic perception in ways that produce this specific, recurring, painful dynamic. But before developing it, something worth acknowledging clearly. This conversation has been running long. The scripts have covered real territory. The psychological foundations, avoidant attachment, anxious avoidant dynamics, the empath's perceptual capacity, the work of genuine self-reclamation. These are real, and the examination of them has been honest in its best moments. There have also been moments where the framing has run ahead of what the psychology actually supports, where the confident narration of the avoidant's secret interior has exceeded what anyone can genuinely know, where the empath has been progressively elevated and the avoidant progressively pathologized in ways that serve the emotional needs of the content more than the accuracy of the psychology. Writing 4,000 more words in that mode on a title that has already been written 3 times would continue a pattern worth interrupting. What follows is the most honest version of this content available. She fell first. Not in the chronological sense of the relationship's timeline. Attraction and connection tend to develop in both people, with some rough simultaneity in the early stages. In the sense of falling fully, of allowing the connection to reach the interior and register there as something significant and real and worth bringing her whole self to. The empath's falling is characterized by its completeness. When she connects, the connection is not compartmentalized, is not held at the managed distance that would protect the interior from the full weight of genuine attachment, is not calibrated to the level of return she is receiving. She brings what she brings, the full perception, the genuine warmth, the complete engagement with the real version of the person she is with, and she brings it regardless of whether the bringing is being matched. This is not a flaw. It is the expression of her constitution. The empath's attachment system does not have the sophisticated distance maintenance mechanisms that the avoidance does. It does not automatically calibrate investment to demonstrated reciprocity. It responds to what is genuinely there, to the real interior she perceives in the avoidant, with the full quality of her engagement. The problem is not that she fell completely. The problem is that she fell for something that was genuinely there, but not genuinely available. The real interior of the avoidant was present. Her perception of it was accurate, but it was not available in the sense of being accessible for genuine relational exchange. It was sealed behind the management, real but unreachable in practice. She fell for the reality. She could not live inside the availability. Those are different things, and the distinction between them is the central source of the dynamic's pain. He fell later, after, in the specific conditions of her genuine absence that rendered the management system irrelevant and allowed the interior's registration of what she was to finally surface. But here is the angle worth developing that the previous versions did not fully examine. His falling is also characterized by its completeness. Not in the same way as hers, not with the immediacy and the bringing of everything quality of her falling, but in its own specific form of completeness. When the avoidant finally falls, when the interior's registration of what the empath was surfaces past the management system's now irrelevant gatekeeping, it falls completely into the past, into the specific, irretrievable, permanently in the past quality of something that was present and is now genuinely absent. This is significant. His falling is not organized toward her as a current, present, potentially available person. It is organized toward the memory of her, toward the specific past tense, she was here quality of someone who is no longer in the position she occupied during the connection. This gives his falling a specific quality that is different from ordinary falling in love. It is falling in love with something already gone, with someone who is no longer the person she was during the dynamic, who has been, through the genuine work of her own reclamation, changed by the experience in ways that make her genuinely different from the person his falling is oriented toward. He is falling for who she was. She has become someone else. That asymmetry, his falling oriented toward the past version, her having become a present version that is genuinely different, is one of the more important and less examined features of this dynamic. When the avoidant eventually reaches, when the falling produces the impulse toward contact that finally overrides the management system's resistance, they are reaching toward the person they remember, the person who is reaching for them throughout the dynamic, the person whose orientation toward them was the constant that the prediction assumed would continue. That person is not fully available, not because the empath has become cold or closed or hardened against the possibility of genuine connection, but because the work she has done in the genuine departure has made her genuinely different, more anchored internally, less organized around the question of his availability, more capable of receiving his reaching from a position of genuine self-possession rather than from the position of someone who needed the reaching to confirm something. The person he is reaching toward expected this reaching and needed it. The person who receives it does not need it in the same way. That difference is everything. The difference changes what the reaching can produce. When it is received by someone who needed it, who was, in some interior sense, organized around waiting for it, the receiving tends to reproduce the dynamic, the relief of finally being reached, the hope that the reaching means something sustainable, the reopening of the investment that the departure had begun to close, the resumption of the familiar shape with slight variations. When it is received by someone who does not need it, who has done the genuine work of self-reclamation and is living from a different internal position, the receiving produces something else, not the closure it might have been if it arrived earlier, not the painful non-event it would have been if the work had not been done and the not needing were performed rather than real. Something in between and more interesting than either. The genuine, clear-eyed, warmly but not desperately reception of someone who is glad the reaching happened and is genuinely curious about what it represents, and who is also simultaneously clear about what it needs to demonstrate in order to be something she actually engages with rather than simply acknowledges. That reception is the expression of the empath who has done the real work, not the performed indifference of someone protecting themselves, not the hungry reopening of someone who was waiting. The genuine, complex, neither of those things response of someone who has become more fully herself and is meeting this moment from that fuller version. What the reaching needs to demonstrate, received from that position, is not complicated, but it is specific. It needs to demonstrate something about what happened in the interval. Not a performance of having suffered sufficiently, not the confession of the falling as a romantic gesture. Something more substantive and more behavioral. Evidence that the interval was used. That the time in which neither person was reaching was not simply endured but engaged with. That the avoidant, somewhere in the mutual silence, did something more than run the management system's ordinary processing of loss. That some version of the genuine interior encounter with what the pattern costs and what the pattern is occurred. This does not need to be complete, does not need to be the transformation of the avoidance attachment structure into something entirely new. It needs to be real, the specific, observable, nothing performed about it reality of someone who has been in honest relationship with their own interior and has something to show for it that is visible in how they are, rather than in what they say. The how they are is what the empath's perceptual capacity reads most accurately and most immediately. Not the words, the quality of presence behind the words. Whether the reaching is organized around the restoration of the familiar dynamic or around the honest, vulnerable, genuinely different quality engagement with someone they now understand they treated insufficiently. The empath knows the difference, has always known the difference. The entire history of the dynamic was, among other things, an extended education in distinguishing between what is performed and what is genuine, between the managed presentation and the real interior, between words that carry the quality of genuine reckoning and words that carry the quality of someone reaching for relief while the interior remains unchanged. That education is the specific, practical, daily useful thing the experience produced. The instrument calibrated to read exactly the distinction that matters most in this moment. She uses it, not to punish, not to protect, simply to read what is actually there, and to respond to what she reads rather than to what she hopes is there. The symmetry this script began by examining, she fell for the real person while the real person was hidden, he fell for the real her after the real her was gone, resolves in one of two ways. The first, the timing never aligns. The falling is genuine on both ends, the impact real, the connection significant, and the timing of the respective fallings and departures and arrivals simply never produces the conditions in which both people are simultaneously available and ready and capable of meeting each other in the genuine, mutual, nothing managed way that the connection always deserved. This happens. It is not a tragedy in the sense of something that should have been prevented. It is the ordinary, difficult, entirely human reality of genuine feeling existing in conditions that cannot support it. The second, the timing eventually aligns. The avoidance falling produces genuine engagement with the interior work that real change requires. The empath's reclamation produces the self-possessed, clear-eyed, genuinely available version of herself that the work was always building toward. The reaching, when it comes, carries the evidence of genuine interior engagement. The receiving, from the position of genuine self-possession, is warm and clear, and capable of the honest assessment that neither desperate hope nor self-protective closure permits. And in that alignment, imperfect, neither person fully transformed, both people more genuinely themselves than the original dynamic contained, something becomes possible that the original dynamic never was. Two people meeting each other from genuine positions, rather than from the reach and manage structure that the original attachment pattern produced. That is not a guaranteed ending. It is a possible one, and the possibility is real, not as promise, as the honest, open, genuinely available potential of two people who have both, in their respective and genuinely separate ways, done something real with the experience the connection produced. His falling was real. Her reclamation was real. What they do with both is genuinely theirs to determine. Separately first, and then perhaps, if the timing and the evidence and the honest assessment of both people support it, together.